Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, and thank you very much for having me this evening. It's a real pleasure to be speaking in the south of the national park, or at least that would have been the idea if I'd come to Cletor and given a talk just outside Machynlleth, because as a charity that is based in the north of the national park, we do tend to, although we do try and work across Snowdonia, obviously with most of us living up, well, with all of the staff living in the north, we do tend to spend most of our time in the north of Snowdonia. So it's nice to have the opportunity to branch out a bit to the south, or just beyond the south, I guess, of the national park. So yeah, I'm going to talk about, we're going to go on a little trip through the national park in spring. This is what we are, the season we're in now. So sort of virtual tour. And then I'll also tell you a bit about the Snowdonia Society, about the work we do and where we emerged from as a charity. And then I will tackle the sort of more thornier question of how do you balance humans and the natural world in 2021. So yeah, without further ado, thank you for coming, and I will start at the very beginning. So this is the 1940s. This is a Welsh sheep hill farm called Dyffryn Mynfyd, just outside Capel Curig. So between Capel Curig and Pen-y-Pass, at the foot of, pretty much at the foot of Snowdon, with a bit further than that, but with an amazing view of the Massif. And this is the hill farm that was bought by a woman called Esme Kirby and her husband at the time, Thomas Furbank, just before the Second World War ended, with the idea of running a hill farm in Snowdonia, having come from the south of England. So, typical of that time, kind of, aristocrats basically coming into a wild place and trying out, the country life. So this is a wonderful black and white image of, of the farm in that time. And I said that, so Esme Kirby, she was the founder of the Snowdonia Society. Her husband wrote a very famous book called I Bought a Mountain. I don't know if you've read it, but it's well worth a read. And it's about their experience, as newbies in the farming world in the 1940s. 5,000 sheep, I think they had. And it's a really beautifully written book about their life, against the elements, tending to this huge flock in a very wild but beautiful Snowdonia. This is Esme Kirby, our founder. She was apparently a very small woman, but incredibly strong, very feisty, and apparently would scare a lot of the local farming men with her kind of strength and very outspoken woman. And even in the, even in middle of last century, she was aware of the changes that were happening in the national park that were undermining the sort of the beauty and the natural features of Snowdonia. And I think that was her reason for setting up a kind of a pressure group, really, which was then called the Friends of the National Park Society. Today we're the Snowdonia Society, but the idea was to put pressure on local authorities to, stop what she saw as insensitive developments in this area of, outstanding natural beauty. And apparently she's a very, very forceful woman. Recently, well, about a year ago, I was giving a talk and there was a retired policeman there, and he knew her and he said he was scared of her, which quite made me laugh. So this is the first poster of the first meeting of Snowdonia Society in 1967. And I think the main thing to take from this is, this aim in the middle. The aim is to be an action society. So it's very much, we're very much a charity that, action is at the core of what we do. And we're not just, although we do a lot of campaigning, so we do a lot of pressurising the national park and local authority. To this day, we also do a lot of practical work on the ground. So action is at the heart of what we're doing 52 years later, 53 years later even. Yeah. Included this because, again, we've got these lovely black and white photos that one of our old members, who was a friend of hers, took of her, and just wonderful. Apparently she was really athletic as well. She used to do the very famous run, the 3,000 feet peaks of Snowdonia. She still holds the record for the fastest female to have run the 14 peaks, which is kind of incredible, really. And you can tell that she's a very petite woman, but a real force of nature. From everyone who knew her sort of said this. So eventually she was actually kicked out of the society, because as with the case with many of these kind of catalyzing people, you know, they're very good at beginning things, but not necessarily great at sort of letting go when their time comes. So she was eventually sort of kicked out by her, you know, her membership. But, you know, that made way for a kind of modernizing of the charity and yeah, sort of steering the trajectory of the charity into the you know, where we are today. So just to let you know our kind of, I guess, our founding purpose as a charity, as a registered charity, and that is you know, that we are here to protect and enhance the beauty and the special qualities of Snowdonia. But there's also a human aspect there too. So, you know, we're here to protect the natural beauty, but we're also here to protect that beauty, to promote it in the interests of people too. So people who live, work and visit Snowdonia. So there's a real kind of nature and people almost coming together within our sort of founding principle, which is quite at the core of everything that we do. So, you know, why protect Snowdonia? Well, there's lots of amazing features here that are unique to this area. Well, one of those being the Ugly House, which the charity was founded on that farm, and then in the 1980s, Esme bought the Ugly House. I don't know if you've been there, but it's well worth a visit once it reopens as a cafe. But that was bought in the 80s, and that was our first kind of office following the farmhouse, which was just kind of run from the kitchen. Today we still own it, but we run it as a tea room and a kind of information centre to promote the work that we do across Snowdonia. But it's well worth a visit. It's a really interesting historic property with a lovely wildlife garden that's tended to by our volunteers and has been for, you know, decades now. I was talking to Rachel earlier. She was telling me she'd bought some of our seeds that are hand-picked by our volunteers, and they're for sale on the website to encourage pollinators in your garden. So it's well worth having a look and supporting our work that way. There's some interesting characters living in the Ugly House. This is Mr. Riley, who apparently lived there during the war, had moved from Birmingham, and he had so even during that time, you know, the Ugly House was seen as somewhere that people would stop on the, you know, as they were passing on their way into Snowdonia, they would stop by and visit the house and garden because of its sort of unique, quite unusual character and facade. And he apparently had a parrot, a cockatoo called Cocky, and he'd get this cockatoo out and entertain passers-by with this funny parrot. So I thought I'd include a picture of him there. So yeah, as a national park, it was established in 1951. You know, the founding principles of a national park is obviously to protect kind of nature and landscape and habitat, but also to provide a place for people, you know, for well-being and respite from, you know, it was after the war that these places were established, and they recognised that people needed fresh air and enjoyment of nature in order to, for their life quality and improve their well-being. So I'll come back to that later, but so obviously an amazing national park in that we have both coast and mountain, we have peat bogs, forest, river, lake, sand dunes, an amazing, you know, we were saying how lucky we feel to be here especially during this last year. We really have got it all on the doorstep, and this is why we really believe that it's incredibly important to protect, you know, this amazing natural heritage that we've got. So it's springtime and the gorse is in flower. I'm sure it is where you are too. I don't know if you've ever put your nose, I know it's a bit dangerous because it's a bit spiky, but if you know, go up gently, approach a gorse bush and smell the flowers, they've got the most incredible apricot coconut smell. It's well worth, you know, approaching carefully and giving it a whiff, because it really is the most amazing smell. And you can actually eat gorse flowers as well. You can dry them either in a sort of a drying cupboard or in an oven on a very low heat for 20 minutes or so, and you can add them to, you know, your yogurt or cereal or cakes and that sort of thing. It's a really delicious and beautiful coloured plant that we have all over the national park. And obviously Snowdon there in the background, which is our kind of crowning glory here in the national park. So I'm just going through a few landscapes just to big it up, really. This is Giftan, which is near Porthmadog. You can see Portmeirion just about in the background there. So again, you know, lots of cultural heritage as well as amazing natural beauty. These amazing river corridors that we have that are just so rich in wildlife and good for biodiversity. Water's not something we're short of here in Snowdonia, so again, something to be really proud of and to celebrate. And then when we look at individual species as well, you know, we have certain things that are very unique to the national park, like Merlot de Carneddau, the Carneddau mountain ponies. And the Welsh language is, you know, so intrinsically linked with those things too, and with the special qualities of Snowdonia. And that we have that above all the other national parks really in the UK. And something that we can really, you know, be proud of. Apparently the Carneddau wild ponies, they're not a distinct species in themselves, but they are genetically distinct. So they've been there for, you know, since the Stone Age, but you know, thousands of years in that one area, hefted to that one area. So again, something very special to protect. Cloch Ar y Cerrig, which is a lovely Welsh name, the stone chat, and you hearing them now making that amazing stones rubbing together noise that they make, always balanced on the top of some bit of gorse or heather on a moorland. Very beautiful bird species, and a very beautiful Welsh name again, because cloch is the Welsh name for bell, so it's, you know, there's a real poetry in a lot of these Welsh names, which we're very lucky to have. We've got the Snowdon beetle, Chwilen yr Wyddfa, which basically looks like a jewel. Very elusive. Not many people have seen them, but they do exist in and around Snowdonia, especially in the really kind of alpine parts where it's very rocky. But I mean, imagine seeing that on your walk. It'd be quite amazing. But yeah, not many left, and they are threatened by things like climate change, and will move northward as, you know, the temperature warms. We've got no end of mosses, amazing diversity of mosses in the national park. Musogl Migwyn, or the sphagnum mosses, which apparently, you know, form our peat bogs that are incredibly important for carbon storage. So, you know, they say that the Amazon rainforest are the lungs of the earth. Well, apparently the Amazon, I think, carries 20% of the world's carbon, or stores 20% of the world's carbon. Peat bogs store 30%. So these are the real lungs of the earth, and the peat bogs are something we don't have a shortage of in Snowdonia, but that are threatened by things like land use, forestry, and habitat destruction. So, you know, very, very important that we keep those peat bogs wet, because it's the water that keeps the carbon locked up and helps to fight climate change. We do a lot of work with our volunteers in peat bogs and digging ditches so that the water is retained, and removing invasive conifer species that have sort of self-seeded from surrounding plantations, because they can be very bad for desiccating the peat bog. I like my old picture. So here's a photo. Apparently the sphagnum moss from the bogs was often collected and used as wound dressing in the wars. So again, you know, that had a huge impact on the health and the vigor of those peat bogs. Again, just to sort of show you how much water they hold, they really are spongy. And I was going to talk about the Snowdon lily, but actually something that's in flower at the moment on our springtime walk is the wild daffodil, which is different to the bigger daffodils that you see. So they've got these paler, thinner outer petals, more like a sort of acidic yellow colour as opposed to a yolky yellow, I guess. And then the leaves are quite blue, and they used to be all over the north and west of the UK, including the national park, and indeed are very much a symbol of Wales, probably because they flower around the same time as St. David's Day. But again, the areas where they flourish have been hugely decreased since the beginning of the 20th century because of habitat loss and grazing and that sort of thing. I went for a walk with one of our trustees a couple of weeks back to see because one of the sites our volunteers have been working on is a site just outside Conway in the north of the national park, and they've been clearing bracken and keeping the sheep off in order to let the wild daffodils prosper again. So I went for a walk to see, if we'd had any good results since last year, which is when all the bracken was cleared, and they've definitely multiplied a lot. So it's amazing, little tweaks that you can do to allow these special species to flourish once again. So I've got a video clip. I'll just show you where it is. So you've got Conway on the far right there. So in the mountains behind Conway, just west of the river, there's an amazing little church. I think it's one of the oldest churches in Wales, 12th century. Llangolynnin, so the patch of wild daffodils that we found and that we're propagating the seeds of is just behind this church here, on a bit of Woodland Trust owned land. And this is Rob, our trustee, who hopefully your sound will work. You can give me a thumbs up maybe if it doesn't. If I press play, you should be able to hear Rob demonstrating this amazing patch of, this is just a picture of one of the patches of wild daffodils, but they absolutely cover this hillside. So it's really special. This was a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully you can hear this. They might pass planning developments through that we think are incredibly insensitive to the integrity and the species of the national park. So we're there as a kind of, what do we call it? A critical friend to kind of stop them in their tracks when we think they're doing things that are out of order. This was an example. We do a lot of work in partnership. So we set up a big campaign around 5 years ago now to protect the Conway Falls, which is a very astoundingly beautiful river gorge just south of Betws-y-Coed, and it's basically been untouched for hundreds and hundreds of years. Very species rich, very diverse. Not really touched because of the steep-sided nature of the gorge, so very pristine. And someone came up with the idea of putting a hydro development scheme in there some 5 years ago. I think it was initiated by NRW, Natural Resources Wales. So we worked in partnership with Save Our Rivers and the Wildlife Trust and many other organisations to fight for and stand up for this amazing gorge. Another picture. We sent an ecologist down there who specialises in mosses and bryophytes, and he did a big study of all the different species that were there, and I think he found over 250 different kinds of moss in that section of gorge alone, which is really quite unusual for such a relatively small area, in terms of diversity of plant species. And just a little catwalk of some of the most beautiful species, I think, some close-ups. I don't know the names, but just look, they're just out of this world, very beautiful. And the starry club moss, that one is, I know that. I can't remember the name of that one. I think that's my favourite, but just, yeah. There was over 250 species, so I haven't got that many to show you, but just some nice close-ups. This is what happens when you put a hydro in place. But again, a very thorny issue because it's renewable energy. It's carbon friendly in a sense. But we just thought, as an organisation in the national park in this particular area, given the amount of diversity and the kind of special nature in terms of natural beauty and diversity and species richness, that this was incredibly inappropriate to be imposing on this bit of the national park. And we won the case, so that was a good news story. And just to kind of hammer home this idea of why the Conway Falls being so special, it was voted, I think there was the country file a few years back, did a vote on the most beautiful places in the UK, and the Conway Falls was one of them that was nominated, along with iconic places like White Cliffs of Dover and Pembrokeshire. So really important places for enjoyment and also for wildlife. So not good places to develop for hydro in our eyes. Fast forward to now, and this is our current campaign. After, given everything that's happened over the last year, we're working with, again, we do really like to work in partnerships, a very much sort of positive and constructivist approach to tackling issues. Working in partnership with the National Trust, Outdoor Partnership, the National Park Authority, and then funded by the Welsh Government, we're about to kickstart a huge campaign on the ground with our volunteers, but also in a digital sense, for messaging and communication to all those people that are going to be coming back into the national park following the easing of lockdown. Obviously, this time last year we were still in lockdown, and you were more likely to see groups of merlot, or the wild ponies, on the top of mountains than you were people. Fast forward a few months from then, and you had this Tryfan, the top of Tryfan, which is one of the most difficult to access mountains in the UK. And yet, if you look at this image, it could be Snowdon. I mean, it's rammed. Loads, thousands of people, more than ever seen before, on the tops of mountains like Tryfan and the Gliders, where previously people would go typically to Snowdon. So yeah, the other part of this, the title for this talk was about balancing humans with the natural world, and we've talked about nature and obviously national parks. The founding principle of a national park is for people to come and enjoy, and it's so important for well-being that people do come and visit national parks, and that's part of our ethos. We are not saying that people shouldn't come. We've had a few people emailing us saying, can you impose fees, like they do in places like Yosemite, pay to go for a pass almost to go up Snowdon, to deal with the crowds and the parking issues. But we're very much aligned again with those founding principles of these places should be free for everyone. They're very democratic. You shouldn't need to pay money to go and visit a beautiful place, in our mind. So again, taking that more constructivist approach, we are doing a lot of work with the digital messaging side of things to educate people on how to sort of behave when they're out in the mountains this summer. There was some interesting research done by the National Park that shows that last summer, following the first lockdown, when people were kind of released, there's a whole new demographic of people that are interested in visiting Snowdonia, and these are the 16 to 25-year-olds, so it's a lot younger demographic that suddenly become very interested in coming to Snowdonia, possibly because they weren't able to go, abroad on sort of weekend trips to, cities or southern Spain or whatever. So yeah, we're seeing a lot more of that new demographic coming into the national park. And again, rather than dissuading or, being, what's the word, sort of cynical or critical of those people, we really want to try and engage with them using the right sort of language and educate them to be responsible when they come and visit, because we did find last summer loads more rubbish than ever before experienced here, and fly camping became an issue. So it's the buzzword this year. So it's like it's not wild camping, because wild camping is taking your kit up into a mountain, setting up your tent after dusk, and then taking it away after dawn and not leaving a trace. There's a new form of camping that's happening, fly camping, which is where people will just drive to a lay-by, you know, along one of the lakes or in the national park, camp there with the cars, and then just, you know, leave everything, all the tins and the rubbish, the next day. And that's becoming more of a problem. So things like that are, you know, very new problems that we need to address. It's not a new problem really. I mean, although it's been very concentrated this last year as a result of coronavirus and lockdown and people being released from lockdown, things like this have been happening for almost 50 years. So I've got an advert here that was put out, I think it's a Countryside Code advert in 1970 something. And this tells the tale of Joe and Petunia going to the national park and how they're behaving. It's kind of funny, but it's also quite dark. But see what you think. I'll see if it'll take me through. Can you see? Are you seeing the YouTube screen? Not sure if you can give me, or is it still on PowerPoint mode? See if Rachel, are you seeing YouTube? Or are you still?
Actually, I'm seeing the PowerPoint still.
You're seeing PowerPoint. Okay, so how do I need to show you the YouTube page. So if I maybe click new share. Yeah, I think I've got it. Sorry, bear with me.
Yeah, you have to navigate over.
Can you see that?
Yep, that's good.
See YouTube?
Yep.
Okay, I'll press play.
Oh, Joe, I have enjoyed our country walk.
Yes, we've come a long way, Petunia. Look, you can see our tracks right across that yellow cornfield.
Oh, yes. It's ever so nice in this field, but I'm glad those cows have gone.
Ah, they're taking themselves off for a walk down the road. Look, through that gate I opened. The one marked private.
Oh, yes. Our little Bingo's having a lovely time playing with those sheep. The exercise will do him good.
Hey, I've hit that bottle, Petunia. It smashed up a tree.
Oh, very clever.
You know, there's a farmer down there with a purple face.
I expect it's all that sun and the open-air life, Joe.
Now he's doing one of those country dances.
Well, I don't think he looks very friendly.
Ah, maybe you're right. Though it can't be anything we've done.
No. But I won't stay where I'm not wanted. Come on, Joe.
When folk come out to the country, why, oh, why won't they follow the country code?
Okay, yeah, just to make the point that this is still a problem, you know, 50 years on, almost 50 years on, which is a shame. I'll just pause that. There's loads of these old videos. They're actually quite interesting. And again, we've asked, you know, we've talked amongst ourselves as members of staff, you know, should we be producing like updated versions of these kind of videos? But actually, the comedy aspect possibly doesn't actually engage with the people that need to be engaged with on this, if that makes sense. We'll try and just go back to the PowerPoint, which hopefully you can see now. Okay, assuming that's okay. Trying to flip forward. Yeah, so again, we really like to try and keep our sort of our tone and our messaging very positive, because that's the only way really that you can make friends in you know, in conservation and in the world of national parks and not littering and that sort of thing. So we do use a lot of social media in our campaigns, and we've recently, oh yeah, I just threw this in because we use our litter pickers as, obviously we've got all these new social distancing measures now for our volunteers, and the litter pickers are about 1 metre each, so we use those as useful sort of measuring sticks for keeping 2 metres apart. This is an example of some of the sort of more modern digital messages that we're putting out, and we're using, again, to target that new age group of people that are coming into Snowdonia, the 16 to 25-year-olds. You know, it's basically true that they're always on their phones, so these are the sorts of adverts that will pop up on their phones on Instagram and on TikTok and that sort of thing, with positive messages of planning ahead and staying safe and helping to reduce litter. And we're using all sorts of fancy sort of tracking technology to see, you know, how many times people click and follow through and go to our website, or go to, you know, the Sherpa bus timetable to plan ahead, and checking campsites and that sort of thing. So we're really, you know, we're really trying to make a difference in terms of how we are going to approach this challenge that we're facing in a really contemporary sense. So yeah, just back to what that original founding aim really about being an action society. I think we're definitely still hopefully carrying on that legacy that Esme Kirby left, to be doing things on the ground. A lot of our work with volunteers, we have hundreds of volunteers that have joined us over the years, and they put in thousands of hours of work, you know, either one-offs or over a long period of time. And local, as well as people who live further afield who want to give something back to the national park that they enjoy visiting. So we do lots of footpath maintenance. There's over 2,500 kilometres of public footpath in Snowdonia, so our volunteers will go out and help to, you know, clear drains and create and upgrade old footpaths and that sort of thing. Invasive species is a huge problem. So our volunteers will go and, I don't know if you recognise this purple menace, but it's the Himalayan balsam, which is was brought over during the kind of rhododendron collecting times in the Victorian era. So comes from the Himalayas, incredibly invasive plant. I'm sure you've got lots of it in the south of Snowdonia and beyond as well. But the advantage of balsam over rhododendron is it's actually very easy to pull up. And yeah, if you are going to go and pull it up, do it before the flowers arrive. So yeah, around now to May is the best time for pulling. It comes out with a very satisfying pop. That's well worth doing. Rhododendron, obviously a massive problem. We do lots of work with the Park Authority and the National Trust with our volunteers to clear rhododendrons. Not as easy as Himalayan balsam, because obviously it involves a lot of cutting, a lot of sawing. It's heavy work. But we are, you know, there are areas where we've been working for years, and it really is looking a lot clearer. And then another invasive species that people don't often think about are these conifer seedlings that pop up on our heathland, in our peat bogs, and they've kind of, you know, transported from the forestry plantations where they were planted, where they're intended to be, but they, you know, because of wind and transported by animals, they will pop up in places where they're not meant to be, and they'll self-seed, and again they'll desiccate the land, which then unlocks the carbon. So it's a sort of vicious cycle. So we advertise this as Christmas tree picking just before Christmas. So we'll, you know, our volunteers will come out and get rid of these conifer saplings, and they get to take a Christmas tree home with them as well. Sorry, that's not very spring-like, but example of one of the invasive species that we help keep on top of. And obviously tree planting as well is something that we take very seriously. We planted, I think last year, in between lockdowns, we managed to plant 800 trees. So we were very proud of that. And this wasn't last year, but the year before, we had 4,500 volunteer hours put into our various conservation work and litter picking work across Snowdonia. So we're very, very proud of that. We even got on country file. So yeah, just to sort of conclude then, I suppose, just hoping to show that we really are continuing that vision 53 years on from when society was founded. And, you know, we have volunteers of all ages, all different backgrounds coming and helping out with our programme of work on the ground. You know, the problems are still there, and we need more support more than ever. So, you know, we're always looking for new people to join us, to volunteer if they have time, or to tell their friends, and, you know, spread the word about the good work that the Snowdonia Society is doing for the National Park. But, you know, it's not just a case of hard graft. We've got lots of members who, you know, will support us financially with a subscription, annual subscription, and in return they get the magazine and events that they can come along to, workshops and walks and talks. So it's not just that we're asking for volunteers, we're also asking for members to sort of help us financially as well. Just a few benefits of becoming a member of the Snowdonia Society. So I've mentioned the events. You get lots of discounts at local businesses. So that one of the Gucciest discounts, as some people say, is that the 20% off at Cotswolds, which, you know, if you need to buy a new pair of walking boots, that's quite a significant amount. And lots of other local businesses like the Tea Room at the Ugly House and cafes and hotels that will offer a discount to Snowdonia Society members. And then you'll also get our magazine delivered twice a year. And of course, that warm fuzzy feeling of knowing that you're helping a small charity that packs a large punch, get the stuff done that we want to do to protect this amazing place. And I think that's all. So thank you very much for listening. And if you are au fait with social media and all that sort of thing, do get sharing and reposting our posts, or go to the website and join as a member, or donate, or even buy some seeds from our hand collected seeds from the Ugly House. And there's many different ways you can help to support our work. And yeah, we'd be very grateful. So diolch yn fawr, and diolch Rachel for the opportunity.